this blue button do?
Ya empezamos mal. Ya
I
empezamos
don't
mal.
know. I don't know what this blue button does. Does it work as the blue pill? We're trying to figure it out. Does that live mean we're live?
Oh no, it's ringing.
You know I can't edit this. You know this is live, y'all.
Already off the rails. We've begun off the rails.
I just want to thank my mama. I want to thank my mama for this amazing opportunity.
You need more like rasp and like deepness to sound like you're from more like back in my day we called it the play button.
I can't edit it.
She loses it every time. She loses it every time.
Rewind. Where's the rewind?
Oh my god! I can't.
She used to tell me that it was like it sounded like all her clients because she used to work at a hearing aid place, and I remember I remember exactly one time my mom was like trying to help this dude pay, and then so she's like with my mom's customer service voice, yes, can you please press yes on the pad? Huh? And my mom was just like. But she like composed herself, and then she was like, "Can you please press yes on the?" And he's like, "Ah," and then just did the thing.
Right, and they get mad. Why are you yelling at me? Huh?
Because you learn how to whisper in a helicopter. Anyway, welcome to the podcast, everybody. We are live. We are in the middle of it. We've begun off the rails. This is the Maria and Friends podcast. I'm adding a new tagline. We are with the shenanigans. All the shenanigans. We are with the shenanigans. Welcome everybody.
Hashtag. Yeah. So everybody, welcome to the Maria and Friends podcast, where we have, it's
at least the friends are present. Maria's my mother is.
Yeah. Compose yourself, woman. This is embarrassing. This is so embarrassing.
How unprofessional. This is so unprofesh.
Oh my god, I can't.
I'm gonna send a email to someone, and it's probably gonna be to my other email account, so they can forward it to the right one.
Oh my god,
I'm gonna email my agent, which is just my email with the word agent at the end.
Oh my god! Okay, so
already coming in, Aiden, what's going on? Everything is good. As you can tell, we are having a great time, and no alcohol needed just yet. Just yet.
Oh my goodness! Hello, everybody. Hello, you. Ulises hit the record button, the live button, and it was right in the middle of them two. Oh my god, making me laugh, and it takes me a while to compose, but thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all your support tonight. We have a great part 2 of a podcast we started last week. So if you're interested in seeing the first part, make sure you go to our YouTube channel. It's still here on Facebook, and you can see the first part of this great conversation that we started. So I'm really excited about tonight, and we started really great with a great laugh, with great camaraderie and stuff. I can't even say it, but anyways, so we're here and that word, right? We're here. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So let me go ahead and take a moment, and we're gonna go ahead and continue the conversation. It is very exciting what's about to happen tonight. So here we go. Welcome back to Maria and Friends podcast. I'm your host, Maria, and with me, as always, my good friend, Ulises. At this point, he's not just a guest, he's part of the family. He sure is. Over the past few weeks, we've been diving deep into all kinds of relationship topics, the highs, the lows, the lessons, and the laughter. Our community keeps growing, and we're so grateful for every one of you who listens, comments, shares, your own stories with us. A quick disclaimer, we are not experts by any means or therapists. We're just two friends sharing our life experiences, our opinions, our journey, in the hopes that something we share tonight resonates with you and maybe even helps you along your path. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow. It's free and it really helps us continue to create more content like this. So, all right, let's get started with the conversation. Tonight's topic is part 2 of dealing with adult children. And we have a special guest, and I'll go ahead and let Mr. Vargas introduce him.
What's going on, everybody? And before we introduce our guest, if you have not already, if you are on Facebook, watching us Facebook Live, please make sure you hit that heart notification. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you comment live. And make sure you follow the page all there on Facebook. And please share. Please share. Please share. Please share. Please share. And if you're on YouTube, if you have not already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And then make sure you hit that notification bell so that you know when Maria and Friends podcast is live. Make sure you share with your friends, your aunties, your cousins, and mamas and thems, and all everybody, because this is going to be a great conversation dealing with
adult
children, and what tonight we're going to be on the topic of forgiveness. So it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful process, and what we have with us tonight, a very, very special guest, very entertaining guest for sure, Mr. Daniel. How you doing tonight, my good sir?
What up? I'm chilling. Not too bad at all. Just always an opportunity to share some of my experience. Always an opportunity. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to do that. And I think that's kind of and my mom will echo the idea. The whole point of us starting to podcast, the whole point of us starting like the online content creator, anything, this whole journey was to just share experiences. And so it's always fun. It's always fun. And it's just, maybe it's because we spent so much time in church telling all of our stories for free that we can just come online and do it now. Because we got some good stories, dude. But no, I'm good. I'm hanging out, chilling on the East Coast. It was 19 degrees today, so I'm literally chilling.
19 degrees in the East Coast. You'd be surprised out here in Pensacola, Florida, it reached 28 degrees this morning.
No way.
Yeah. We always have the big old thing for like last year in January, this time, earlier in the year, it snowed 10 inches in Pensacola, which is like, number one, the fact that it snowed in Florida is ridiculous, but the fact that it was 10 inches
wild.
Was insane. I love it. I was raised in the cold weather, and I just love the cold weather. Don't give me the humidity. Give me the cold. But yeah, man, we definitely appreciate you hopping on and allowing us to really just be blessed by the wisdom that you have and the experience that you'll be sharing tonight, and also Maria as well. Because I don't think she really knows what's going to come out your mouth, right?
No. if that's one thing my mom can promise you is that she doesn't know what's going to happen. at least when it's me, and then when I get around my brother, even less.
Right. But tonight's conversation is it's going to be a deep one. It's going to be a good one. We're dealing with the aspect of forgiveness, and Miss Pri. What you know about FPL? I actually work for FPL. Just want to throw that out there. So yeah, FPL is Florida Power and Light. They are the biggest electric company in the state of Florida, and I mean they're trying to monopolize. They're trying to monopolize the whole state. But that's a whole other conversation for a whole other time. And yes, way, like you've seen Bill and Ted. Yes, way. So
that's a throwback. That's a throwback.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anybody young enough who actually watched that, but we digress. We digress from that. because y'all know Maria knows my brain, and we can literally have like 19 different conversations, big old web. But tonight's conversation, in dealing with forgiveness and when it comes to the parent-child relationship, from an early age to pretty much till adulthood, it's forgiveness is a very touchy subject, but we know that people need to be touched. Especially when people are holding on to certain bitterness or unforgiveness or hurt in whatever shape or form. It is super, super important for us to really, to have this conversation, especially in this time of year, because it's the holiday season, starting from Thanksgiving all the way up until over past New Year's. It's really about family and getting together, and there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who really don't have family for the reasons of forgiveness and the reasons of unforgiveness and hurt and betrayal and things of that nature. So it's super important for us to have this conversation. And why? Because what we're going to discuss tonight really is the dynamic between parent and child, even if that child is an adult, right? It's super important for us to engage in this conversation, because I think this is more of an issue than what people ever like to admit, right? Us as parents, my parents, they weren't perfect, right? My dad did not know how to love until the first time he ever heard "I love you" from his dad when he was 21, and it was after my grandfather already had a major stroke. So it was just more of like my dad never experienced affection, right? So him raising me, my dad never gave affection for like the first 16 years of my life. It was cold. It was mean. It was rude. It was everything that he had experienced, because that was the way that he knew how to love, how to behave, how to raise a child, right? So there were some issues, some things, and that's just an example of countless others. I'm sure anybody that's in the chat, you have your own story of how your parents raised you, and now as a parent, you kind of started raising your kids a certain type of way, right? So so we're going to dive into that. We're going to dive into that, to why that is. Understanding the full context, understanding the full story will help people in their healing process. It will help people to finally be able to move past the hurt, move past the embarrassment, and be able to, for themselves, right, to be able to experience the fullness of what we believe that God has for each and every single one of you. So I'd like to start the conversation, but first, Maria, do you have anything you want to say or add to?
Yes, excuse me. Absolutely. What I wanted to say is to start with a little bit of explanation. If this is the first time that you see us, and hello, Tati. And if this is the first time that you're watching this podcast, I wanted to just explain that the reason we have a part 2 of today is because last week we started a very important conversation, and it all started with Ulises and I talking about, as parents, dealing with adult children. That is different. It's a different kind of relationship that you have to have. And we even talked about this trend that Ulises and I were talking about, this trend that we've been seeing, and it's called the no contact trend happening with adult children and their parents. So, and in that type of conversation, we, Daniel wanted to chime in and give us his point of view of what is happening in the minds of adult children. Why are some of the reasons where these adult children have decided to go no contact with their families, no contact with their parents, no. And then we've talked about some that go a year without no contact, and then 2 or 3 years, and some that are considering it. And then we also talked about that if that is a case, that why are they feeling that way. And we talked about boundaries, we talked about toxic relationships, we talked about that if you are going to try to do that, find somebody. And again, we're not professionals, we're not therapists, we're just sharing our life experience and the wisdom and things that have worked for us, in the hopes that at least, and Ulises and I have talked about this, and even Daniel, we just want to start the conversation. We don't have all the answers, only God does. But if we can at least acknowledge that there's an issue that's happening and give you some kind of direction, and let's get the conversation started. Let's get the conversation talking about this, that it is a trend, and it's something that if it's not done the right way, it could really ruin relationships. Because if you just, as a young adult, if you decide you want to go no contact with your parents, you have to know, did you make the right decision? Did you ask advice of professionals? Did you ask advice of your spiritual advisor? When you came to that conclusion, did you have enough to justify that? Because you really could ruin your life, not your life, but you could ruin really good relationship and miss out. And by the time you realize that you did wrong, it might be too late. So we want you to think of the consequences of following this trend, of following this way of thinking, what it could really mean to your relationship, to your growth, and to other people, because it's not just about you. And then last week I talked about how it affected me as a parent with when my kids went no contact, and Ulises has talked about his relationships. And so that's what prompted us to start talking about this. And the last thing that we shared was that in this process of rebuilding, and we talked about this, that Daniel and I and Gabriel, we didn't go back to the same relationship. When we decided to start talking again after my divorce, we had to build a whole new relationship. We could not, there was no way you can go back and fix everything that you said and explain everything that you said, because you can get stuck in a cycle. So we decided to start to forgive each other, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about it. And I'll let Daniel, share his point of view on it. But I personally had to learn how to forgive. I had to learn how to release that feeling of, I'm the parent, he needs to do it my way. That entitlement, because there's such thing of that, this entitlement that we have as parents, that I brought you to this world, I can take you out, and that entitlement that no, I'm the parent and he needs to bow to me and blah blah blah, and I'm the parent. So, and what that can cause is such a bigger barrier between you and your child. So it came to a point that God helped me realize that I had to have a death in me, and it's an ego death. My ego had to die in order for me to be open to a new relationship. In order for me to open, my expectations had to die. My way of thinking had to die. And then if I wanted to build a relationship with both of my sons, my ego, I had to take a big slice of humble pie and understand that I needed to hear their point of view, that it wasn't just about me and what thoughts and only my feelings mattered because I was a parent, and only my feeling, because no, I wasn't dealing with a child anymore. I was dealing with an adult. And the same way I would have to have certain boundaries with another adult, in the same way I would have to have a communication with another adult, that's the way I had to see my boys. I had to see, it was not my little boy Daniel. I had to see Daniel Michael Ibarra, a grown man, and I had to rebuild the relationship with a grown man, Daniel Ibarra, not my little baby boy, not my little nanito, like I used to call him. So, and then with Gabriel the same, and I had to respect their boundaries, and then that point I had to hold, different standards for that relationship, in the same way he did. And I'll let him explain his point of view. But that was a process that God had to really show me day by day. It didn't happen overnight. It started with a text, then a call, and then I had to, and when I'm telling you, the ego had to be put in the back burner. Sometimes all I got was a hi mom, and that was the extent for weeks. And I had to sit on that. Hi, Mom. And I had to sit on that. Not right now, Mom. I'm not ready to talk. Okay. But what I saw is that as time went on, and I let God guide me, and I let forgiveness and love guide me, and let God heal my heart. And I saw a change in me. And first, I led with a change in me more than I waited on Nano. So what happened is that he had to see me as a safe place. Then he got closer little by little and little by little, and it was a process. I'm telling you. And now we're cool. Now we're cool. There's still a lot of boundaries, and there's still, like we've talked, we still have to work on it. He's still growing. I'm still growing. We're changing, and as life goes on with any relationship, you grow, and you have to do that check and say, where are we at right now? Where are we at? So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, I mean, the idea of boundaries, right, is it's between a parent and adult child is some of the hardest to build, right? Because you have a lot of history, right? You have a lot of, as you said earlier, like learning how to relinquish that parental authority. Like, so there's a whole lot that goes into it. And so it's like, as a parent, or understanding, of a parent to a child, that you're just not, when it comes to boundaries, like you're not just setting limits. You're basically rewriting a whole story. You're writing a whole script. So Daniel, when it comes to, and you're hearing your mom, and and how hard it was to set them boundaries and things of that nature. Why do boundaries matter?
So that's kind of a loaded question, because when it comes to boundaries, first you have to redefine what boundaries are as a child. Mm-hmm. Because as a child, boundaries kind of work almost as a threat. Like, if you do this thing will happen to you, right? Normally as a child, I mean, everyone's been a child, so you remember when you had your parents were like, it worked kind of like a formula. If you do this thing will happen, or if you do this thing will happen, right? All those boundaries were set up for you as guide rails, or as warnings, or as like they were dictated to you. When you grow and you realize that you can now in fact make up your mind and what that boundary threshold is. So, like, for example, my mom used to be like, don't drink soda late at night because all your teeth are going to fall out. That was my boundary. When I turned 18, I was like, I'm drinking Baja Blast at 3 a.m. Like, right. And that's the thing. There's like a very childish way where you have to relearn what boundaries actually are. And then there's that transformation of just like, oh, now I know what boundaries actually entail, what they actually dictate. And now I know what I like, what I don't like. There's like this exploratory period after that part. And then it's a weird progress, because once you figure out, oh, instead of being so, like, in our household, a lot of our boundaries were dictated by a couple things, like societal norms, what the Bible says specifically, and then what was dictated to my parents on behalf of Christ. Like what Christ dictated to my parents of, like, your boys are going to do this, they have to do this. This is what I called out of them. And my parents, to their credit, did the best that they could to balance those three things, because they're like, we got to get you through school, we have to get you into the workforce, but also we have to teach you how to rely on God and how to figure out all those things. So there was like, it was difficult in the sense where we had three definitions of boundaries, because it's all like, don't break the law, but also don't let the law tell you what to do, because the law can't tell you what God needs for you to do, but also do it if you want to do it. So it was like all that, but then we had to grow up and then figure out what a boundary was. Mm-hmm. Then we had to figure out how to reintroduce those boundaries to our parents, because on being on the other side of that, it's interesting to hear, because everyone has that point once you get older, you're like, oh, you set this boundary because of this specific reason, because of what was going on, or because of maybe where we lived at, or maybe, you know, I'm like, oh, so as an adult, you understand geographic location, state of the world, everything that's going on. You have to figure out what those boundaries are because they mean something different. And then now you're just like, oh, I live in a different world. Like, we now live in a world where everyone born after a certain year will not know a world without AI. And that's the boundaries that existed when I was a kid no longer apply to now.
Right.
And so I had to, growing up, I had to figure out, oh, now that I became an adult, I figured out, oh, this was someone living in the world that understood a different version of the world, trying to guide me better. And then now I'm on the other side of that, and then it brings this reality, this realization. It's part of the reason why I kind of owned up to my prejudices against my parents, because that's another thing people don't talk about, I feel, is that when you grow up as a child, especially with parents who want you to succeed and want you to be better and guide you on the path of Christ and guide you in the way that you should go, that there's a prejudice that kind of works its way in, and you're just like, whatever my parents say, they're immediately wrong. And there's that prejudice where it's like instant negative, whatever. So then when you're just like, because my dad was a big proponent of, you guys are Latino, you guys people are going to think a certain way about you off rip every time. It's your job to change their minds. And then for the longest time, me and my brother were like, nah, people are just going to love us the way we are. And then we're just like, no, the world doesn't work like that. So it was like a lot of those things where you balance that out. And that's why, like I mentioned the last time in this conversation, you have to reintroduce yourself as an adult to your parents, because now you have this balance of, I now 20, 30 years later understand where you were coming from. Here's the principles that I learned now. And it's weird. It's hard, but you have to make that conscious decision to bridge that gap to begin that conversation. And I remember in the beginning, it was weird and it's awkward and it's kind of cringy and embarrassing, because, you know, there's things like, hey, mom, I'm dating now. You want grandkids or not? And then like there's different things of just like, cool. Well, now the affordability rates in the United States where $80K a year, I could have a full house and everything. You know, back in like 30, 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, I would be sitting pretty if I was at $80K a year. Now I have to be like 150K plus. So there's a lot of those different things where you have the real world aspect of it. And then the good thing about it is that I do specifically remember, and there's nothing that will ever leave me, that my parents always taught me. And that's the thing. We always hear all the time, more is caught than is taught. And my parents were adamant of just like, the world could change, everything could change. We could have flying cars in 20 years. Doesn't matter. God won't change. So everything that's around you will change, but God won't change.
Right.
And it was funny because I don't know if enough like kids of people who follow Christ, like people or kids that grew up in the way of Christ, it's hard to explain because I never hear them talk about how Christian parents or parents who are followers of Christ have to do this thing where they're like listening to everything that I say, but if God tells you something different, it doesn't matter what I said. So like it's this weird thing of just like, how do you balance like your parents who are the authority in your life being like, trust everything I said, but also this other entity supersedes me, so do everything but. And that was another aspect that I know particularly my brother and I had to really, really, really figure out, because then that's when you go around your journey of like, you find Christ for yourself. So when I hear that my mom is like, it was tricky, it was hard, I'm like, no, I fully understand that now, because I couldn't even imagine, like I'm at the age now where my dad had me as a child. And if I had me as a child, I would uppercut that child every day. And I'm like, thank God for my dad having the grace that he did and having the level of Christ that he had, because I'm like, I know the way I am now, and I can't imagine. I'm like, I don't have the patience. I'm like, dude, my back hurts. I have to warm up like an old box Chevy when I wake up. And I was doing that while screaming about how like Power Rangers are the greatest thing on earth, while tying up to everything and chucking them across the room. My dad earned his years. My dad fully earned the wrinkles, because I'm responsible for a lot of those. But
now, but you know what's very interesting, man, is really when it comes to the aspect of boundaries, right? Like, because like coming from a parental aspect, like we're used to access.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like literally, if I used to tell my daughter, do not lock that door. And she used to lock that door because this is my house. I have access to any room at any given time, at any given place when I need to. And she defied my orders. So I fixed it real quick. Like I grabbed my screwdriver and my power drill, and I was just unhinging the door. Zzz, 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 zzz. Like you not get in the door until you understand the concept of this is my boundary, right?
Yeah.
I have access to everything that I have. And years later, my daughter's grown. There was a time period where we was kind of like boom, 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 right? And I got on that phone and I began to yell at her. In the years past, when I yelled, she sat down and she listened. And then one day, bro, she put me in my place. She said, do not talk to me like that. And she was like 21, 22. And I'm like, sucking it all in, right? Yeah. But it's because there's a shift.
Yeah.
A shift happened. And we as adults, as parents, like if we don't discern that, we're gonna mask, control as concern, right?
Correct.
Like we're going to really like, some parents go as low as try to use guilt and obligation.
Yeah.
Like I'm just trying to help you out here. I'm trying to say, because there's that level of control, because some things we do know better, and we know if our child makes this decision, this is going to happen. But it's like the aspect of control is huge when we're so used to it for 18 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So Maria, you about to say something?
No, I was agreeing. Yeah.
We're both agreeing with you.
Okay. So Maria, as a mom, right? And as you began to, and you were perfectly just illustrating exactly like, man, like, I started seeing this, and this is what I had to do. This is what I had to change. So what does, but before we start getting to the aspect of forgiveness and unforgiveness and whatever, what does a healthy boundary look like to you when it comes to, dealing with your adult children?
Well, first of all, to me, a boundary is like a fence. It protects you and it protects me. So when there's this fence of understanding between Daniel and I, it protects him and it protects me. And who sets the boundary is we both talk about it. So there was a time that Daniel said the same thing. Mom, stop talking to me like I'm a kid, like I'm 10 years old. Stop it. And I'm a grown, I'm not going to say the word, man.
I said I was a grown, beautiful man.
Yay.
That's exactly what
I'm
I
like,
said.
stop talking to me, like that. I don't like it. And I'm like, exactly the same way as you did, Ulises. And then it stopped me. And then I said, okay, so I'm going to start talking to you as an adult. So there's boundaries. And then he said that boundary, that fence. And I understood that I can only go so far. And then I need to start talking to him as a man. It's like, sir, this and this. Hey, listen, Daniel. Then I would set a boundary because he has his boundaries and I have mine. Mm-hmm. I had to set a boundary. Okay, you are too comfortable making fun of me to the point that is disrespectful. So because we goof around a lot, but there was a time that him and Gabriel they have this crazy ability to go beyond sarcasm. Mm-hmm. sarcasm. I mean, they are sarcasm kings. So, and they would have their own language and their own thing and their own. So, but as adults, because they saw me in a different light, so they would start goofing around and goofing and talking, and there was a line that they crossed several times, but because I was so eager to build the relationship with them, I let it go. I would let it go until one point as we were more closer and healthier and it was safer, I sat Daniel down and I said, you know what? I appreciate you, how we goof around. I appreciate how open we are, but you are crossing the line and it's not sarcasm. It's to the point that it's disrespectful and it's making me feel some kind of way. And Daniel said, Mom, I didn't realize it because I just go and go and goes, yeah, that's why I'm telling you. I'm setting the boundary. This is it. You need to stop that. We need to find a different way to talk to each other. We need to respect when I tell you, okay, ya, párale. The mom is like, ya, párale. When you hear my ya, párale voice, stop it. And he goes, okay, Mom. Okay. And then we had to say, okay, Mom, if I tell you I can't go, I can't go. Don't push me. Don't manipulate me into doing it. And he had to put me in my place. And we're being transparent here. If you want transparency, we're gonna get you. He said, Mom, stop guilting me, stop manipulating me. If I don't want to go, it's because I don't want to go. I don't like them people. I don't care for that activity. I can, I'd rather do something else. And I will go once. Maybe because I love you, Mom. But other than that, don't push the limit. I don't want to go. I don't like them people. This and this and that. And that's it, Mom. Do not manipulate my emotions or don't use my love for you against me. If I say no, respect my no.
It was very much like that.
To go to your point, he had his boundaries. I have my boundaries. And we had to talk to each other about those boundaries. And we just didn't say, no quiero. That's it. No, we had to explain why that boundary was there to protect my feelings and to protect him. And I had to, so boundaries to me is that fence that it protects me and protects him. How do we come to those conclusions? A lot of talks.
It was very much that. And to kind of further the points that my mom was talking about is there was a lot of discussions because in those discussions we not only established new boundaries, but we discovered other boundaries that we needed to have in place. Because if there wasn't any communication about it, then it would lead to us getting offended or angry or hitting like a trigger or hitting something like so. Like for example, I mean, not to get too close to home, but when my mom decided to leave my dad, there was a lot of unresolved. I didn't understand at the time, or there's a lot of unresolved feelings of abandonment and trust issues. And so we had to come to find, like, it took me so long to be like, maybe I should just ask my mom why she left. Like something simple like that, because it was so easy to be like, man, you left me. Like, I'm so hurt right now. I'm so mad. Like, I can joke about it now, but it was like reality bending at the time because I mean, now I say it as a joke, but I remember distinctly telling my mom and at least my dad too, on a separate occasion where I was like, yo, we didn't know you guys were like not good. Like there was so much of a act for me and my brother to protect us and to protect, which who's to know if it was the right thing or not, because you can argue both points. Again, kind of going back to like understanding your parents and now as you grow. And because my parents were like, or my dad, both my mother and my father said the same thing separately. And they were like, we didn't want to fight in front of you because A, we didn't want to be that messy family. We didn't want to be those messy parents. And then B, we wanted you guys to be okay and figure that out and then kind of grow and do your own thing and be protected. And then both of my parents were just kind of like, not that it doesn't matter, but it's just like by the time we resolve these issues, we'll just have to discuss them later. And so that's kind of exactly what happened. It was one of the things where a lot of those things we had to rediscover and relearn, and we had to talk about them. So in those discussions, and I had to be open. I had to tell myself, I'm coming in to meet the human. I'm ready to speak to the human who happens to be my mom. It was never the other way around, because it was kind of the same thing of like, this person has to eat food like I do. This person gets tired like I do. This person does like I had to remember, and I had to understand that my mom is also living the human experience. And I'm like, if I get cranky and tired when I'm hungry, I wonder who I got it from. You know, like that whole thing. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, then that makes sense. Duh. Like, of course, my parents are human. But that's that thing where, as my mom mentioned earlier, ego death. When there was around, I don't remember around what age, but there was a certain point in my life where I had to let my superheroes die. And letting my superheroes die humanized my parents. And they stopped being these unbreakable superhumans that had some profound Infinity Stone connection to Jesus Christ and mystical powers. And because that's how we understood it when we were kids. Like, you know, when you're a child, you understand this, and like kind of as you get older, you're just like, yeah, because it still kind of sticks a little bit. But then you come to find out, oh, they just got more time in the game. They've done the work with God. They've done the work in jobs. They've done the grind. They know some tips and tricks because they've just done it a lot. And you're just like, oh, we're all figuring out this current present part of the world too. Like we're all figuring this part at the same time. We've all only been alive the one time, so we're all figuring it out together. And it's just like, oh, maybe I should reintroduce, because again, like the world changed when I got older. The world, I mean, as it should. Like, again, things like technology changed, streaming changed. We went through the pandemic together, things that we never would have experienced like anywhere else, and things that never happened before, and we happened together. And I had to make the decision of, this human person is going through the same thing with me. I know I love this person. And here's another that might be a little touchy for my mom, is that
wait, hold on.
Let me just drop the hammer real quick, please. I had to learn how to love my mom again. I fell out of love with my mother. I fully was just like, peace out. Like, there came to a point where I'm like, I'm paying my own bills, I'm paying my stuff, I'm feeding myself, I'm doing all the things, and I'm just like, this person is a non-factor anymore. That version of my mom, whoever I understood my mom to be, is just kind of encapsulated, and they're better as a memory than they are as a tangible person. So at that time, I was just like, cool, I had a mom, and that was my mom, and then this person now is still my mother. But you know, so I had to have that, like I said, let your superheroes die, let your, like, that version of your mom die. And it had to be like, that person will ever remain there. And then I had to rediscover this new person.
Right.
And then, I don't want to say fortunately, but we had the pandemic to lean on, because we're just like, now we're stuck together. Now we're face to face. We literally can't run from each other. And we literally, because I can't be like, oh, don't talk to me. You hungry or not? Like, you know, it was like one of those things. Like, it's just like we were stuck in close proximity.
No.
And then like even the thing with my father, because in the same thing too, I went through a lot of the same things with my dad, and I had to like re-understand him as a different person. I had to have that funeral for him, and like my superhero died, and I had to change all that up. And then it was like strange, because then my father eventually moved on and got remarried, and I'm just like, me and my brother, oh my god, when my mom says me and my brother joke about everything, we kind of joke about everything. Because when my dad was like, it's funny. It's because it's real. The day my dad was like, I've got remarried, and my brother calls me, and I'm like, hey yo, he's like, I'm not calling her mom, and then he hangs up. And then so it was just funny, because I'm just like, man, this is like out of context. It's wild, because my dad's a human person. Yeah. Like, of course, my dad wanted different things. My dad wanted to move on. My dad wanted to find happiness again, and my dad wanted to do certain things. And I'm just like, oh, we joke about it because we filter a lot of things through humor, and that's how we had to understand it. And we're like, no, like, he moved on with his life. We should be allowed to move on with ours. So those moments, and I want to kind of stress that for parents for sure. If no one else listens to anything else that I say, is parents, you need to let your kids see you as human.
Yes.
You need to let their superheroes die. I remember the day my dad told me in tears, I used to be your Superman.
Wow.
And then I was just like, yeah, but then now, like, even now that I'm older, I had to reflect on it. I was like, I did, because if I tried to be like that Superman that worked back then when I was a kid, it wouldn't have worked in this version of the world. It wouldn't have worked this version for me. And the whole thing is that parents, please understand to let your kid's superhero die, but also one of the pitfalls, because in my time in church, I've seen the struggle of the good parent, where someone will be very great parents. They'll do the healing, they'll do the work, they'll do the guidance, they'll do the therapy, they'll do all the things. And then now they get on the other side of that, and they're kind of having a tough time getting what they've worked for, if that makes sense. So now you reach the other side, and you're like, dang, why is this child that I raised, they just don't want to be at home. They want to go out and they want to conquer the world. They want to do the things, and they're after, hire all these things. And I was like, well, yeah, you taught them to do that. You taught them to heal. They're no longer codependent about their feelings. They're going to share what they think. They're like, why is this? And that's the thing that I've seen in serving in ministry, and even with my own parents, of, like, I remember one of the times where my dad was like, why do you talk back to me so much? And I was like, because you taught me how to speak my mind if I have an issue. So I was like, why are you yelling at me? This is what you told me to do. And so it's kind of like the whole thing of, like, a lot of times I'll see parents, and I think that has a role to play with no contact, because at least on the child side of things, it's like, why are you booing me? I'm right. Like, this is what you told me to do. Like, this is how I understand what works. And it's just like, if you impede on that, I'm going to do the thing.
But it goes back to the whole aspect of access, right? This or the whole aspect of authority, excuse me. Like, this is what we're used to doing, right? So, but it's amazing, just kind of hearing your heart and hearing Maria's heart. It's almost like, and when I used to do marriage counseling, we used to tell the couples all the time, like, the person you married 15 years ago, that's not the same spouse you married. People change. If your spouse changes, then imagine what your children go through, right? You see it, because like, if there was a manual on how to raise kids, like, they got like 20,000 different books, and all based off of their experiences, and people are like trying to, well, maybe if I should do this, and my child will act right, or whatever the case is, and or books on how to be better parents. But it's like God has given Daniel a specific identity, a specific personality, a specific, how he reacts and how he behaves and things of that nature, that God graced Maria and your dad to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
And so it's like out of 8 billion people here on earth, God chose Maria to be your mom, right? So because of that, God has graced her, with the wisdom and the knowledge and the discernment to be able to handle everything that Daniel has to offer, right? And be able to help cultivate, who you are as a person, help cultivate, what God has called you to be and what you've been chosen to do. And so it's a huge responsibility. And so And as a parent, I know I felt a huge responsibility when it came to the spiritual aspect of my kids. Right. I felt a huge responsibility to make sure, like, Jesus, kids, like, just graduate. I mean, you're just like your dad. You're getting C minuses. You're barely squeezing by with these grades, and you're procrastinating like your daddy. And it's like I'm seeing me and my kids, and when it comes to school, and it's like, I just need you to graduate. I just need you just figure it out, Mm-hmm. But thankfully my children graduated. But I remember, man, like having a conversation with my kids. And this was after they did a no contact on me, right? For 8 months, I didn't hear from my kids. 8 months, I, was separated from the ex, got into another relationship. Things were going crazy with that whole divorce process, and a whole lot of stuff happened, which encouraged me to go ahead and just move out of state. Mm-hmm. Right. So I moved out of state. They stopped talking to me for 8 months. And, to God be the glory. We reconciled. The relationship is improving. We're doing great. But having a conversation with my kids, and me being honest with them, and it's kind of like what both of y'all allude, especially you, Darren, what you allude to earlier, like, for X amount of years, they saw me as not just a good dad, because I was very active, very active. I was the one that was getting up in the morning, taking them to school. I was the one, when they were babies, that I would get up in the middle of the night to feed them. Like, I did everything for my kids. And then eventually I became, a minister in the church, and I became an associate pastor in the church. I became a youth pastor. So they see all this stuff. So their image of who their dad was, versus then when me and their moms split up, and then when we divorced, and it was just a messy situation. They saw the raw version of Ulysses, right? And so it changed their dynamics of how they saw me, and it takes children. I don't care how old you are. If you have a perspective of your child and that perspective gets shattered, like, it takes a while to adjust to that. The hurt, the betrayal, the disappointment, the abandonment, like it takes a while to recover. But what is so amazing really about this whole process is that God is in full control, and he knows what he's doing. There's something that God gave me a couple years back that I live by. It. And the Lord said that God allows with his wisdom what he could easily prevent by his power. God allows with his wisdom what he could easily prevent by his power. So it's like God allowed this. I mean, we could blame the devil all day long for sure. But even according to Job, we know that God gave him permission to do it. So regardless, God knew. And so it's like, the ministry that is being birthed out of disappointment, out of discouragement, out of betrayal, out of hurts, out of unforgiveness, like, all of that is necessary. Why is that necessary? Because there are countless of other children in your shoes that have to hear your story.
Authenticity. Yep.
And we all know that, especially when it comes to the youth, for the most part, outside of them dating scrubs, they can differentiate what real from fake, right? So, but it's like, what do we do as a parent? And now we're seeing our children grow up, And as a father, I want my children to succeed financially. I want them to have good jobs and things of that nature. And when they hurt, I hurt. They call me crying. They call me with fears. So it's a beautiful dynamic. But it's like, what's most important to me as a dad is, what can I do to help you heal? What can I do to help you to overcome any doubt, any situation? Like I tell my kid to this day, is there anything you want to tell me? Is there anything that you're feeling? Anything that you need, to be freed from? Like, I don't want you to be angry. I don't want you to be hurt, me or your mom. As much as I don't like her, don't be angry at her. Right. And that's so, but so
my dad would say the same thing. He would. There was and I think that's another aspect too that was a very, very that really did help me heal, and it helped me on my journey of healing with my relationship with my parents individually. And that I want to make that distinction, because a lot of the friends that I've had that have gone no contact, fully no contact, we're talking years, almost decades with their parents. Whenever I hear them speak about it, they talk about them as a unit. And it's difficult, because if you blame them as a unit, you'll never understand the individual choices that had to happen for that to be a thing. And that's the hard part. So understanding your parents as individual humans was a hard part for me. And then you understand, because it's easy to shift blame entirely. My parents did this, they never did this. And it's like, well, did you ever ask why? So like when and it's funny, because like I asked my dad the lore. I was like, so what happened? And my dad was like, well, no, I couldn't make enough money as just a minister. So I, as the sole provider, had to go lean on a skill set that I had, and then I had to go relearn a skill set, and then I had to go make these things, and then God blessed my endeavors and made that profitable. So then that way we could make the choice to buy our own place, so that way you, your mom, and your brother would be comfortable. And I'd be like, Mom, why were you always doing things? And my mom was like, I chose to go work because we wanted to do certain things and we wanted to make better choices. And it was those things where, as parents, I'm as a child of parents, as one is, it's important for you to be human enough to your children, especially your adult children. I can't stress that enough. Be human, demysticize yourself, be human. And for Christian parents specifically, let your kids see you struggle on your faith walk. I cannot stress that enough, because me watching my parents grapple with the mortality and with their calling from God helped me out so much. Like, you wouldn't believe. Because my mom's present, I'll use my mom as the example.
Wait, hold on. You haven't told me about this.
No, just wait. When at this point, if you're watching the Maria and Friends podcast, you have an understanding that my mom had her health battles, her health scares, and she had made different decisions ministry-wise. She had to, me watching my mom, how to rediscover her path in Christ outside of being a first lady, insane. Like, because for the longest time, it's like because for the longest time, again, when we grew up, we were the pastor's kids. You had pastor. I was so used to people calling my mom pastora. I was so used to people saying la hija del pastor travieso. I was used to all these things, like the titles, the things. It's to the point where it gets like white noise. And the thing is like, I understood when I got older that my mom was used to it too. There's a ceremony to all this. There's a ceremony to the interaction. There's a ceremony. And then so seeing my mom having to rediscover the part after that, and then changing the definition of what her capacity, not her capacity, if anything, her capacity increased because now she had to learn a different skill set, but what her role was in ministry and how God had to change and how my mom had to rediscover the trust. Like, it's weird. I don't know if I ever told her, but I had to watch her relearn how to trust God in a different way. And I had to watch her do that. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, so it was one of those things where watching her having to relearn how to trust God, this entity that we've been taught our entire lives that you trust no matter what, and it even supersedes your parents. And for me to watch my mom have to relearn how to trust that, and I'm like, but I thought you and God were cool, and like you were gonna do everything that He said because that's what you told me, and that was like the understanding and the boundary. Like, I've been basing my whole life off of that, but then having to watch her relearn that taught me so much about my walk with God, where I'm like, oh, I'm not taking orders. It's a relationship. Duh. Like, it's one of those things where, and because I also had to watch my dad do the same when, you know, he went through his whole thing. He was no longer Pastor Johnny Barra. He was no longer the Wonderkin prophet. He was no longer, I mean, he's still a prophet. I'm not taking any of that, but like his roles changed. And for my dad to be like, I'm not hellfire high. What would Dad used to say? High fire, preach fire, and leave, something like that. My dad had a bunch of isms, and so he would be like, I'm no longer that dynamo that would just come in, tear it up, pray, and everybody would pass out and leave. You know, praise the Lord, pass the ammo. He's like, I had to change that. He's like, my dad, and he's like, now my role is completely different, and so I had to watch him, and watching him relearn that and be human about it and have a human experience relying on God taught me so much about my walk with God, to where I'm like, oh, I don't have to be embarrassed to tell God, hey, God, I looked at her butt. Like, I feel weird about it because...
Oh, Lord. Daniel, we're live. I cannot edit that stuff.
I'm just saying, you wanted it.
We love the
Lord. Oh, Lord. Don't get me canceled.
No, it's a real thing. Like, I had to learn how to be human and trust. And that's the thing. Like, there was so much reverence for Christ as a kid that I was embarrassed to share my struggles with God, as weird as it sounds, because it was always like, God, I'm having an issue, like, eating Wendy's every day. Like, now I can ask that to God. When before I was like, that's childish. I'm not going to ask God about that. And God's like, no. If you're going to be my child and if you're going to be obedient, I need to be integrated in every aspect of your life.
Amen.
Yeah,
Amen. That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
So Maria, the last question that I have for the evening, as a parent, to an adult, children, it's churn. As we say in North Kakalaka, churn. It's. I know you pray for them, and I know you ask God, like, Lord, just be with them. There's not a mother's love is never going to go away, right? A mother's, thank God for praying mothers, as they say in the church house. Thank the Lord for praying mothers, right? Mm-hmm. All of that is great and all that is wonderful. But as now, you're on your own, your children are, for the most part, stable, they got their jobs, they got their own lives, and it's like, first of all, job well done on that. That's a huge accomplishment. That's something that you should definitely pat yourself on the back for. So, but now it's, it's Maria, and she is overcoming her, the things, that she had to deal with in the past. And there's a whole, that's a whole other podcast that we can do on this. How were you able to come to a place of peace when it came to understand, or learning how to let go of control with your kids, and learning how to accept their boundaries? Because that's tough in itself, just accepting boundaries, because it's like, you know, it's that's another, that's a whole other podcast for sure.
Yeah.
But how were you able to come to peace, you know, and as you know, because you went from children in the household to now you're on your own, you know. How were you able to cope with that, and how were you able to come to peace with all that?
Oh, real simple. Only God. Only God. And it has been, not to get preachy, but
Get preachy. Get preachy.
every struggle that I have gone through, every transition from from the no contact to contact to let me think about it, to all the things that Daniel mentioned, going through the divorce and rediscovering myself. Every step, every transition has been my relationship with God has walked me through. One of my favorite verses in the Bible in Psalms 23 is, "Though I walk through the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rock and thy staff comfort me." And that's, we've heard that so many times, but honestly, every time I went through that valley, whether it was the no contact valley, whether it was the cancer valley, whether there was the divorce valley, the depression valley, the I don't know who I am valley, I just made a decision that in that valley, God was the light, and all I had to do is walk one step. I didn't have to solve it all at one time, but all I have to do is keep walking towards that light, keep walking towards God, because the word does say that He is a path. He is a path. That light is a path into my way. So if anybody asks me what is my secret, I have no secret. It is God, honestly. My prayer life, going to church, I became, I grabbed onto God. When I tell you I grabbed onto God, I clinged for life. Literally, I just got obsessed with God. Like, Lord, I'm too weak, but if you get a hold of me, because if I hold on to you and if I grab you, I'm weak and I'm gonna let you go. But you just grab me, grab my life, grab my being, and don't let me go. Walk me through. I mean, I remember that one of the days, and there was this point, and I it's very in my mind, very clear at that point where my kids are not talking to me. This is happening. This is happening, and I had just had this major surgery, and I'm in front of the mirror, and I always remember that at that moment I felt the protection of God like no other. When I'm standing in front of the mirror, I don't have no hair. I have there's this scar, this operation. I'm weak. I am totally abandoned by what you can say the world. And I'm looking in the mirror and I say, I release myself to you. I give it all. And there wasn't not just that moment, but every time that it was too much for me to handle, I would just be like a child and say, I am letting it go. And whatever happens is in your hands. I am letting it go. And I would say that and I would cry. And I remember those moments to say, okay, I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go of this hate. I'm letting go of this unforgiveness. I'm letting it go of this anger. I'm letting go of this frustration. I am letting it go. And I am going to throw myself in your hands, God, like a little child. I'm just going to throw myself, and whatever might be, whatever happens might happens, but I'm in your hand. Be the coordinator of my life. Be the coordinator of my life. Be my lawyer. Be my healer. Be my advocate. Be everything that I cannot be because I don't have no strength. Be that for me. Be that. Oh my God. Be the breath that I can't even take sometimes. Be the joy that I can't have. Be that for me, God. And when I tell you that I don't wish cancer on nobody, I don't wish divorce on nobody, I don't wish no contact with the kids, I don't wish any of that on anybody. But I am glad that happened because I got to see a face of God. I got to see another face of God that had I not gone through that, I would not have seen or known right now. I would not have seen. I know what it is to feel God's mercy. I know what it is to know the God that heals. I know what it is to know the God that restores. Oh my God. I don't want to preach, but woo. I cannot. I'm so grateful. These are tears of how grateful I am to have had the privilege to go through a trial. That sounds so weird. But had I not gone through that, I would not know what I know today. And nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can take the God I know away from me. Nobody can take the knowledge of the God that I know firsthand. There's nothing like looking to death in the eye and walking away from it and knowing that God got you through that. Amen. There's your answer, Ulises.
not to quote.
There's your answer.
not to quote a video game, but there's this video game called God of War Ragnarok, right? There's a part where he says death can have me when it's earned me. And there was during that whole cancer battle, I just remember seeing, like, as a caretaker during that point in time, it made me realize how pointless my issues were. And again, I'll confirm, or I'll further what my mom said. I don't wish. I know when I said let your superheroes die, mine almost did. And I saw it happen in real time. And it's one of those, it's tough, but you will come to find out if something like that happens, you will come to find out how pointless and trivial a lot of those things are. And that is another big factor, because when my mom was going through her battle, she was very open about it. It was very different to when we were kids and my parents were dealing with their individual sicknesses of like not being enough and their individual in like emotional things and not resolving any of that. My mom was open with her battle. My mom was human with her battle to the point where I could be like, if she can make it, I can do that much more. If my mom can make it and get through it and still lock in with Christ, as sick and as beat down and as worn out and as, you know, as much as she struggled to still hold on to God, what excuse do I have? Like, to watch my mother lose all her hair and not keep food down and rely, and then just because I remember my mom would always say the same thing, because she would tell me, I don't know if she knew it was unintentionally super dark, but she was like trying to be like, because my mom was a very light, bubbly person, and she's like, my mom used to say jokingly, he's like, you know, if it takes me, I'll be okay, right? And I'm like, who says that? But it was a very true thing, because my mom in that moment was being very human, and she's like, no. Even though I'm having a hard time and I'm struggling, I'm human enough to tell you that it's okay if I end. Like, it's fine, because I know the God I put into you. And it was in those moments like that that made me understand this is why my parents grinded so hard, and this is why my parents were so adamant, and this is why my parents said what they said and did what they did and put the focus on what they focused on. So and that's the thing. If you ever get strong enough and I'm not talking to anybody specifically, just those children who go no contact. If you're ever strong enough to ask your parents why they are the way that they are, you might learn something about yourself.
That's powerful. That is powerful. That's powerful. You know, I appreciate you both, Maria and Danny, sharing what y'all sharing. I know, you know, sometimes, you know, opening up can be a little bit like, do I really want to hear that? But all of it is necessary. All of it is a part of growth. You know, when I was able to have the conversation with my kids, um, you know, it takes a whole other level of humility to be able to sit down and hear the shortcomings. You know,
Yeah,
and
I want to hear Lisa's. I want to hear your side. I want to hear. We got a couple of minutes. Tell us how you dealt with it. Let me ask you the question. How did you go through all those moments?
it was tough. No, it was like I can tell you it's one of those moments where I realized that um you know that I can have grown conversation, you know, because it will 18 years is like, no, we can't have this conversation because you just don't understand it, you know. But when I was finally able to sit down with them and kind of share where my mindset was, um, it changed the dynamic of everything. Because my kids were now able to understand, you know, where I was. They may not have agreed, whatever the case was. A lot of times they understood. We understand, but but it was a moment like where, I've always asked God, like, Lord, teach, give me more humility. I just want to stay humble, and it sucks when God answers it. It really sucks when God answers it, because God has a way of truly humbling you as a person. And so, but we talked, we cried, we did the whole, we did
Yeah.
the whole thing, and so I just know that, and I love what you said earlier, where that God takes you through things because he wants you to experience him in a way that you never would have experienced him any other way. you know um and then so it just brought up the scripture of James chapter 2, where it's like, hey, count it all joy. Or James chapter 1, whatever one, count it all joy when you go through various trials and tribulations. And it goes on down to say that to let patience have its perfect work, so that you be lacking in nothing. And so the whole point of a trial and the whole point of a tribulation is to give you something. It's to give you something, because again, let patience have her perfect work, so that you will be lacking in nothing. And that's the whole point of a trial, is to give you what you need for the journey ahead. To give you what you need for that, because I just know that and for me, God is a God of experience. That's how I know him. I grew up in church. I was a pastor's kid. I knew, if there was an Emmy for how to fake a Christian life, I was the perfect actor. I knew how to fake it, and so, but when I began to experience God for myself, when I began to, to see things that, experience life, and it's like this is who God is for me, and so, um, growing up, growing up as a parent, that's how I always tell people, like, I grew up as a parent. Like, I was 18 years old, 19, straight out of high school, when I had my first child.
Wow.
So I was,
Wow.
looking back on it now, like, my son's 21, but when my daughter's 26, but it's like when they were 18, I'm like, yo, I had a child at this age, and so
That's what Daniel said.
Yeah, because I was going to ask. So, being that, do you think so? My dad used to explain to us a lot, and like, because my dad only had boys, so as men, he was like, being a man at that age was different. Do you feel like you had a footing to stand on when your kids were that age? Because I kind of want to get the perspective of another parent, especially like a younger parent, because I know my particular, for my parents, they struggled a lot, like, oh, we're not hitting the mark. And they're like, because my dad would share things with me. He's like, I'm glad that we taught you as a man. So did you feel maybe that because of the time that you had the child, you didn't feel like you had an even enough footing to describe to him or better show him how to progress? Because again, you said you were figuring out as you were going. So did you feel any kind of insecurities on being like, trust in God because this is how you should do it? Or did you feel any anxiety in the direction you were giving them?
No, that's a very good question. For sure, it was a level of anxiety for sure because, I had my daughter first at 19, then I had my son like at 24, and so even super excited to have a boy to carry on the family name and the whole nine. There was a whole lot into it, but it's like, growing up, just having that church mentality of I have to raise these kids spiritually right. Mm-hmm. Like to me, that was the most. If there was any pressure on me, it was that. Because I grew up in church, and we had to sit down and in our rooms or on the kitchen table for an hour and read the Bible, and there was structure. We had prayer. We were in church, 6 days out of the 7. We had to be there, and we had to dress up. It was a whole lot, and so it was like I wanted to instill those same type of disciplines without all of the nuances of it. I wasn't like I told myself, and that I was not going to be like how my dad was. That was my biggest thing. I was very affectionate with my kids. I made sure I told them every day that I loved them. To make sure that I didn't tell them they were a disappointment. I did all of those things. But the one thing that I still struggled at the time was spiritually raising them. Like I didn't want them to make mistakes. I didn't want them to be like their dad. I didn't want them to struggle with addictions like their dad did. So there was a lot of pressure on that end, and I learned quickly. That it doesn't matter if you shield them, you're not around them 24/7.
That's right.
So they're going to get into their own stuff. They're going to get into their own things. And I remember one time, and we're literally like, at that time I struggled with pornography. That was something that I was battling with and struggling with. And I had this mindset that as long as my kids don't know, they won't be affected by it. Right. And one of my kids got caught watching some stuff. Right. And so it was like, when I say it broke me. It broke me to the point where I was like, just leave my kids out of it. Like I was just like, I remember just sitting on the bathroom floor, just crying and just feeling so much pressure, man. It was like I remember, I literally thought I was having a stroke.
Wow.
Like it was just so much going on. I was just so angry with myself and so angry with God, and because it was like, I'm doing my best here.
Did you work? Yeah, you worked at it. It's to do all that work and have it just,
get punched back in my face, and I remember like the Lord told me to, open up the Bible. And I opened it up to Psalms 51, and I'm paraphrasing, but David was like, if my offerings of rams or bulls and goats, if all that was good enough, you would have accepted that. He's like, but God said, all I wanted was your broken spirit and broken and contrite heart. And the spirit broke it down because I'm a little slow, right? So the spirit was like, hey, if your fasting was good enough, if you're reading the 7-step process of how to was good enough, if your prayer was good enough, like all these things were good enough, God, I would have accepted that. He's like, but I'm allowing you to see this because I need to break your spirit. I need your heart to be humbled. I need to break your heart. And so when that happened, God showed me that. And I remember going to my living room and I'm just like God, like, what do you want from me? You know, like what is it that you want from me? And I remember God showed me a vision of myself, and I'm laying down on a hospital bed, and I had all these scars and scabs, and just, I mean, everything was infected. And God said, I'm going to heal you, but in order to heal you, I had to reopen these wounds.
Wow.
And I just remember telling God, like, Lord, whatever you're gonna do, just do it quickly. And that process, God began to reopen wounds.
Wow.
Hurt. God, it hurt. But God began to heal these wounds, and God began to reveal, you know, these areas that first and foremost, as a man of God, where I was failing, as a husband, where I was failing, and as a father, that I needed where I was failing. And it was through that process of learning how to let God work.
Amen.
Learning how to let God love on me first. The Bible says that we love God because he first loved us. And so it's like God took me through this process of understanding his love for me first.
Amen.
You know, it takes God to love God. How am I supposed to learn how to love God if I don't let God teach me how to love him? You know, and any spouse will tell you that. Like, you know, if you want to love me, you have to let me teach you how to love me. You know? So, but it was through that whole ordeal, through that whole process, man, where I just know that my mistakes, my hurts, my habits, my hangups, whatever you want to call it, brought me to a place where I began to like fully understand the grace and the love of God. You know, and I was telling somebody earlier today, you know, and because my daughter was boy crazy, right? You know, she was boy crazy, and good God Almighty, how my daughter, many times I wanted to hug her real tight around the neck, just hug her real tight around the neck, because she was boy crazy. And so 3 nights in a row, because, you know, I grew up being spanked. I got spanked with branches and chanclas and you know, cords and everything.
Oh Lord.
So you know, we used to whoop our kids. You know, some for sure was overboard. You know, like and my daughter got the worst of it because she was the oldest. You know, and so I remember like 3 nights in a row I had the same dream, and the dream was that I was angry at my daughter, and I had this belt, and I would just whoop her, and I would keep whooping her till she cried. That was the first night. Second night, the same dream, whooped her till she cried, and then the third night it was the same dream, and I'm just whooping her till she cried. But then she turned her head around, and it was like the most demonic smirk I've ever seen. You know, and I realized like, oh, this is not my daughter. And I was like, in the dream, I was like, why am I so angry like this? And I woke up, and I remember the Lord telling me, like, you need to treat her the same way that I treat you. You know, when I began to really think about how God spoke to me and how God responded to me, Not once did he grab a belt. Not once did he ever yell at me. Not once did he ever, express his disappointment. It was always love. It was always encouragement. It was always, it was so much love surrounded by what God was doing. And so it changed the way that I began to treat my kids. Like, I can't react this way anymore because now I'm being hypocritical. Mm-hmm. Because why am I going to treat my daughter, my children in a way that God never treated me? So it was, again, another level of humility that had to take place. So all in all, and I feel like we can go like another hour on this thing, but it's God uses everything in our lives to expose us, how we are, and expose who He has called us to be. God uses us as kids to, as we grow older, kind of look back. Hey, well, this is what God was doing. This is what He taught me at that time. As adults, God uses experiences to teach us. As parents, God uses experiences to teach us. So it's all about learning, growing, and really just something that Maria said earlier was like trusting God. Like I don't know what plans, I don't know how God's gonna do it. I know God is gonna save my kids. I know God's gonna use them mightily. How He's gonna do it, is I'll let them testify to that because
something to behold. Well, I have to say it's been a great conversation. I want to thank both of you for just sharing your hearts, and I think all three of us have been transparent, open about some things that we've gone through, and I want to appreciate everybody that listens to us and even comments and tells me later on that they really were blessed and touched by something we said. And I hope that if you just tuned in, I really recommend that you go back to the beginning of this and you can see the full episode also on YouTube, and it'll be here on Facebook and stuff. But we've had some really nuggets tonight. We've had some really amazing conversation nuggets, and that is our purpose, to get the conversation started, to get the conversation going. We've been talking, and just to land the plane. Dealing with adult children is a different level of needing God in our lives. So whether you're the child, whether you're the parent, we still need God to intervene. And we've talked about healing, and we've talked about forgiveness. And just to a last thought on this is that forgiveness is a decision. It's not a feeling. You need to decide to forgive every day. You need to decide to forgive every offense. It takes work, not just once. You need to forgive twice. You need to forgive 3 times. That's why the Bible says, if the righteous falls 7 times, because why? It takes more than once to forgive. It's just, you forgive, and every time you remember, you forgive again. So just forgiveness. Remember, forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling. So, and we can talk a little bit more forgiveness later on, but I want you, if you are listening in, if you could please share, if you can comment, if you can like, all those things really help us continue to do these podcasts with these conversation. And we would like the feedback. We would like to know what you think, or what resonated with you, what touched you. So it is really important. It's free. It's like we've said before, it's free 99, but it means so much to us when you comment, you share. Like I want to thank Annette, Maggie. I mean, everybody who's tuned in. And if you're watching this on the replay and something that you like, share it, say it, tell us about it. And I just want to say thank you so much. And I think Ulises, if you want to close us out with something.
No, for sure. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another edition of the Maria and Friends podcast with our special guest, Mr. Daniel Ibarra. We appreciate your knowledge or your input. You know, it's very, very good stuff, man. So we appreciate you joining in, Maria. We're going to keep pressing forward. You know, next week is Christmas week. As far as we know, tonight there will be no show as of next week. So enjoy your Christmas holidays with your family and friends.
It's gonna be my turn to be up in the mountains.
It's gonna be her turn to be up in the mountains and sharing pictures and making people jealous. Because Colorado's beautiful. Colorado is beautiful. And y'all listen, Christmas is next week, and 2026 is right around the corner. Like, sheesh.
Dewisherman, Colorado. What's up?
But so if you guys have any plans for 2026, man, we'll stay for another podcast. I'm looking forward to 2026. But maybe in the week of the New Year's is when we'll reconvene and we can talk about, just the goals and what. For sure, what I believe that God is sharing with me for 2026. So I definitely want to share all that, with the family when we all have a chance. And Merry Christmas to you, Miss Annette. Merry Christmas to everybody. If we don't see you, don't get to talk to you, have a Merry Christmas and then you enjoy yourself. Stay out of trouble. We don't want no calls talking about, hey, can you bail me out of jail? Or any of that stuff. So we love y'all. We appreciate every single one of you guys. It is past some people's bedtimes here in Central Time Zone in Pensacola, Florida. I'm sure in the East Coast in Virginia, it's already 10:11.
Yeah, almost 11.
Almost, but he's 30 something.
He can hang. He can hang.
But all right, we appreciate you guys and see you guys next week, or not next week, but the week after. Love you guys.